Okay, hi everybody. This is going to be another one of those sort of anonymous broadcasts because I'm in a hurry and it may just be a half-hour broadcast. There are other things to do here. We've been talking about the founding. This is number 43, I think. We've been talking about the founding of the Temple of Ibez in the central part of South America. And we just collect some of the things we said here, that the movement for the spreading of the secret doctrine is about 18 million years old. And only 4 of the original instigators still remain. So that may be Sanat Kumara and the 3 Buddhas of activity. Not sure about the esoteric Buddhas. Anyway, I hazard a guess there. The third point is this hierarchy for the externalization of the Shambhala impulse started, it was called the Temple of Ibez, and it started about 17 million years ago. Let's see if there's more here. This should be, okay, number 3, and somewhere is a number 4. And the Manas was aroused in a triple manner, and that manner was either direct incarnation, or the implanting of the spark of mind, or the stimulation of the lower mind. So we have a question about the mental unit, and how far that was developed, because it seems that it was developed before there was the implantation of the spark of mind. At least certain references seem to show that. I'm going to try to do it that way, set the numbering value. Okay, number 5, if it says 5, yes, it was about 17 million years ago. The coming of the hierarchy and the founding of Shambhala being about 18.5 million years ago. So think of it, 1.5 million years before the decision was made to create the Temple of Ibez, and it's the first outpost of the Shambhala fraternity. Okay, it's an acrostic. What's it called? An acrostic, yeah. And each letter means something. It stands for one of the great beings, one of the great avatars, and the avatars may be expressions of the planetary logos. At least that's how I see it. Their work was different from the work of the adepts today, because animal man becoming man was so primitive under the circumstances, and the work had to be done. That doesn't say so here, but the work had to be done with the etheric and the physical body, and the methods were considered relatively crude compared to what they are now. Okay, so let's see what further. Okay. The remnants of this today are the Hatha Yoga and the Tantric practices. Hierarchical methods changed drastically. Maybe it was still during the Lemurian period, as initiation was offered of a kind. The door to a more advanced type of initiation was offered in Atlantis. When the door of initiation was open in mid-Atlantis, but also in Lemuria, the door of initiation was opened, probably for a form of the first initiation. Right, that takes us pretty well to where we reached in our last discussion. As I say, this may be a relatively short presentation because, well, you have to take the time when you can. So at the time the door of initiation was opened many millions of years ago, the Lodge came to two decisions. And this will give us the hint as to whether we're talking about Lemuria or Atlantis. That individualization must cease until man had not only coordinated the physical and astral bodies and could think self-consciously, but until he had also transcended the physical and astral. So we have here the closing of the door of initiation, and when he is becoming group conscious, then the door into the kingdom of self-consciousness will again be opened, but this is more likely for most animals in the fifth round. So there were two momentous occasions. There was an opening of the door in the Lemurian times, but also in a higher sense when the Moonchain Eagles came in Atlantis in the 4.3, the third subrace of the fourth root race, correlating with the third chain, the Moon chain, and that was a higher form of initiation possible. So let's just say that early man was physical and somewhat astral, and these two fields had to be somewhat mastered before the door of initiation could again be opened. There would have been, I suppose, and well, they know the reasons, but some kind of overcrowding and some kind of insufficient emphasis on cultivating man, and maybe too much mixture of animal culture and the mental culture that was ahead of those who had been individualized. So the Lodge is deciding on the divine plan, really. I mean, in other words, they get the purpose from Shambhala through their highest representatives, but then they have to adapt that through a plan. Now, in Shambhala, there is also a kind of plan, which is a prototype, but members of the hierarchy who are custodians of the plan have much to do to adapt the purpose and the general Shambhalic plan to the circumstances that they find. Okay, so. All right, going on. No, that's not it. All right. Now, that the path of mysticism must lead eventually to the occult path, and that plans must be made to impart teaching, and mysteries must be organized which would reveal the nature of God in all that is seen, and not only in man. And so I suppose this is the definition of occult learning and preparation for initiation. The path of mysticism does, Neptune leads to Uranus, and the Atlantean way leads to the Aryan way. The Atlantean way is definitely mystic. The Aryan way is occult, and plans must be made to impart teaching, and mysteries must be organized, which would reveal the nature of God in all that is seen, and not only in man. So a broader understanding of the wide range, the inclusive range of God must be understood by man, and he must not be self-centered. The other kingdoms of nature are very important, and whatever we call God includes all that. Man must be taught that through an individual, that though an individual, he is but part of a greater whole, and that his interests must be made subservient to those of the group. So the future demands the development of group consciousness. Let's see, do I have that? Yeah, group consciousness. Gradually, the teaching was reorganized and the curriculum increased, as ever it is, even in recent times, when comparing theosophical presentations with the more modern presentations. Little by little, the mysteries were developed, which would give man entree into the higher possibilities and higher faculties. Little by little, the mysteries were developed as the people became ready for them, until we have the marvelous schools of the mysteries of Chaldea, Egypt, Greece, and many others. Well, he's certainly complementing the mystery schools, isn't he? Okay, so let's see. Complementing the mystery schools, which are returning now. We've been bereft of what they could convey. It is said, of course, Pythagoras was an adept, or he was an initiate at least, probably was a man of the third or fourth initiation. These were the mysteries of Greece. Plato was said to be initiate of the mysteries. Maybe Socrates was too. We don't know the names so much of the Chaldean initiates or the Egyptian initiates, but of Greece we seem to have a little bit of a sense of who some of the most prominent of them were, and still are, I suppose. Now, we go on, we're still talking about the development of the coming of the hierarchy and the development of the hierarchy and through the Temple of Ibez and subsequent developments. These things have to be mentioned. The relatively low point of evolution of many men and their naturally physical polarization, and this was true at the time and still is true. What can we say? True regarding the low state, mostly astral, but now changing. But this was true at the time, and even now I can't necessarily say there has been insufficient development, but so many human beings are still in the kamic, or maybe especially in the kama monastic stage, and they can be reached more emotionally than mentally, and more through ideals than ideas. So going on, the work of the black adepts and the followers of the left-hand path. Well, this came from the previous solar system and also from the moon chain, coming from the previous solar system and also from the moon chain. When the Ibizan, how do we pronounce that? Ibizan adepts, again under instruction from the masters at Shambhala, I guess what we see here is maybe perhaps we see hierarchy being differentiated from Shambhala, the directing center. When the Ibizan adepts began to withdraw into the temples to make the mysteries more difficult of attainment and to work against abuses and distortions, a number of their erstwhile followers, many of great power and knowledge, fought them. And thus we have one of the causes of the appearing of black and white magic, and one of the reasons for the purifying waters of the flood. There were a number of floods, says Blavatsky, being deemed necessary. But let's just say Atlantis was purified. Lemuria destroyed by volcanoes, but Atlantis was purified by the waters of the flood. And, I seem to remember that one of them was 800 and something thousand years ago, and another 200 and something thousand years ago, and maybe even earlier. I think Blavatsky, there's one about 11,000 years ago or so involving an island called Poseidonus and maybe Daitya, something like that, and maybe even a much earlier flood. But anyway, what we have here is the turning away of some of the Ibizan adepts to the left-hand path and becoming eventually black masters. Okay. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because even at a high stage, one can make cataclysmic mistakes, and this showed that the quality of love had not yet pervaded even those who had great knowledge and power. I think when we combine the first and the third rays without the second, we have trouble, and maybe when we look at some of the countries today that combine the first and the third ray, we can see the seat of potential difficulty, either now or in the future. So, low point of evolution, that's the physical polarization at that time, particularly, and the work of the black adepts and the followers of the left-hand path is another factor that is among the three things mentioned, and the powerful thought form built up in the early Ibizan mysteries and which, particularly in America, are as yet undestroyed. Interesting. He tells us that I think the United States or America was the center of the old Atlantean continent. So we're not having all of Atlantis sinking. That idea that the entirety of Atlantis sank is probably not true. So there was the powerful thought forms built up in the early Ibizan mysteries, and of which, particularly in America, are as yet undestroyed. This gigantic dweller on the threshold of all the true mysteries has to be slaughtered before the aspirant can pass on. That's quite a strong word, isn't it? Slaughtered. Oh, my goodness. Okay, yeah. So it sounds like that thought form was not adequate for the present days. Okay. Well, I think we have a great deal of psychism here. Well, here, I mean, in the United States, in America, he tells us that. Strong psychic tendencies, and something new has to replace the older thought forms. Now, he seems to suggest that thought forms which were even built by the good adepts also have to be slaughtered. It goes without saying that the negative thought forms would have to be slaughtered, and the slaughtering of what used to be the good thought forms probably simply relates to their present day inadequacy. Okay, now number 10. This is interesting history, isn't it? The work of the Ibizan adepts and the mysteries of the Temple of Ibis are still persisting and are being carried out by the masters and adepts in physical incarnation throughout the world. So that's some of the good work. We have a continuation, and we're told, that each new presentation of the Ageless Wisdom has to have a degree of continuity with that which was past. And if it doesn't, it's probably not genuine. So we have a continuation with, I think, an elevation of presentation, more for the mentally focused disciples of the present day. Okay, so the work of the Ibizan adepts and the mysteries of the Temple of Ibez are still persisting. Obviously, those are not the thought forms that have to be slaughtered, and are being carried on by the masters and adepts in physical incarnation throughout the world, and there are some. At least they have the Maya Varupa, and they can put in the physical appearance. They teach now. Okay, what does this continuation of the Ibizan mysteries teach? They teach the meaning of the psyche, the ego, or the soul, and of the human unit, so that man may indeed be what he is, a god walking on earth, his lower nature, physical, astral, mental, completely controlled by the soul or the love aspect, and this not in theory, but in deed and in truth. So maybe this is the gist. The story of the soul is the major teaching, and this we find, of course, in Master DK's work with Alice Bailey through a number of his books. We probably learn a lot more about the ego, the consciousness within the causal body or egoic lotus on the higher mental plane than we do from other sources. So just repeating this continuation of the mysteries of the Temple of Ibez still persist. If it was founded by the Shambhala fraternity, it probably developed into something very suitable for the coming ages. Whoop, that's not going to work. They teach the meaning of the psyche, the ego, or the soul. All of those are equivalent terms, and of the human unit, maybe personality and soul, so that the man may indeed be what he is, more essentially, a god walking on earth, his lower nature, physical, astral, and mental, completely controlled by the soul or the love aspect. When this is the case, the physical body will have no lure for the real man. The emotional nature and desire body will no longer lead astray, nor will the mind shut out that which is true and spiritual, but the God will use the three bodies as vehicles of service for the race. Well, right there, he's kind of given us the kind of traps that it's possible to fall into, the lure of the physical body, the being led astray by the astral body, the will-o'-the-wisps across the swamp, the Irrlicht, as it says in German, the false light leading to well, maybe even death in the swamp, through quicksand. And it's so easy to find brilliant people concretely whose minds do shut out what do they shut out? That which is true and spiritual. The mind being in this case, the mind being the slayer of the real. Right. But the God which we are, St. Paul, no, why is this? Okay, so let's try that. No, that's new. Ye not that ye are gods. Okay. We'll use the three bodies as vehicles of service to the race, and hopefully some of us are coming into that kind of soul consciousness where we identify ourselves not as the instrument, but as that which uses the instrument. Then will the human kingdom, number 4, be transcended, and man can pass into the spiritual kingdom, number 5. Human kingdom, I'll just put a 4 there. Spiritual kingdom, the kingdom of souls, number 5. They're there to have further lessons, just as infant humanity, when passing out of the animal kingdom, was trained and taught its functions and work by the Ibizan teachers. Now, all of them, they weren't part of our earth humanity. They weren't apparently part of our moon chain humanity, because the Buddha was most advanced on the moon chain, and well, or was he? Maybe there was still more advanced than he, but in the modern age, the Buddha most advanced, and he couldn't even take the 3rd initiation on the moon chain. Well, initiates have come and gone and passed on. we will have our opportunity, and we will serve, and we will pass on. In Atlantean days, the goal of the hierarchy, that the hierarchy of teachers set before themselves, was the awakening in man of the love nature as a step towards the awakening of the heart center. It seems to fit, given the rays of Atlantis, 6 and 4 and 2 being cultivated. To do this, the teachers at that time were themselves focused deliberately and of intent in the heart center, and chose to work entirely through that center, subordinating their mental equipment, which they had, of course, and the mental energy they could use to the need of the time. This was what can we call this? A big sacrifice. So in order to teach and to give and to meet the need of the time, the teachers of that period focused deliberately in the heart center. Very interesting how they give up their higher possibilities, as is said of Sanat Kumara and other great beings. And the Tibetan says, think you not that we do not have areas of great interest in the world, in the larger world, other than just taking care of you? That's the implication anyway. They kept their mental force in abeyance when training the initiates until the time the third initiation was reached. So it is now, it now has higher requirements. Whoops, sorry. REQ. Nope. Sorry. REQS. Okay. In our race, the condition is reversed. We're in the Aryan race, the fifth, that's correlated with the mind. The hierarchy is working now entirely on mental levels, though basing all endeavor upon past achievements in connection with the heart center. The initiates of the present day are expected to have their heart center open to support their growing mind. There are many, the members of the Black Lodge are brilliant in their own way, and we are told have developed the concrete mind to heights that we normal human beings cannot imagine. Maybe we don't have to know too much about that, but the great problem might be if the concrete mental sphere becomes a sphere unto itself, and then the ATOWM number 13 is activated by the presence of that other isolated sphere, the concrete mind. So in our race, the condition is reversed. The hierarchy is now working entirely on mental levels, and some of us forget that because we've had that Atlantean training, and many are the people who, in their approach to spirituality, are still very Atlantean. And, they look at the work of Master DK and say, oh, it's so mental. You people are so mental, and as if we don't have any heart. Well, it's foolish, really, but that's how it appears to them. Up to the third initiation, therefore, disciples have to endeavor to work entirely with mental energy in an effort to control, master, and use it. And what does it say of the second initiation? Of the second initiation, spiritual, what is it called? Spiritual intelligence and mental focus. I'm not getting that exactly right, but it's, mental illumination and spiritual intelligence are required. Their attempt is concentrated then upon transmitting from egoic levels the will aspect of the soul, we might say, through the mind. That will has to be imposed upon the personality until it has become the automaton of the soul, and then we say, in a way, enter Vulcan. Then the intuition takes control, and the energies from the intuitional or Buddhic plane begin to make their impact upon the form nature. And the Buddhic vehicle is coordinated mostly after the third initiation. Prior to this period of intuitional control, there are many lives wherein the intuition may begin to play its part and the student learns the meaning of illumination. So what are we saying here? That illumination is the precursor of true intuition. Okay, illumination sometimes is associated with Scorpio and Sagittarius being one of the intuitive signs, but also the conveyor of inspiration. Until after the third initiation, however, it is the illumined mind, and there we go, required in the third initiation, which is the dominant factor and not the pure intuitive perception of pure reason. Well, let's remember this. Illumination is something that we can well seek under the guidance of Master DK, but it's not the entire thing by any means, is it? No. Until after the third initiation, when the Buddhic vehicle under Neptune is coordinated, it is the illumined mind, which is the dominant factor and not the pure intuitive perception or pure reason, and Master Morya calls this straight knowledge. After this great initiation, which marks a definite transition out of the form and more a focus on the higher mental plane, out of the form of consciousness, the initiate can function at will on the plane of intuition, and the mind steadily regulated into the background till it becomes a part of the instinctual apparatus as much as the subconscious instinctual nature, as much a part of the subconscious instinctual nature as is the instinctual nature which materialistic psychologists so much stresses. So in prep for the fourth initiation, the intuition is coming into power after the third initiation. Intuitive perception, pure vision, direct knowledge, and ability to utilize the undifferentiated energies of the universal mind are the main characteristics of the Aryan adepts. Whoa, undifferentiated energies. That is an interesting idea. There's kind of a seamless use of the mind here. And it's not so, let's just say, the mind is not, I'm just going to use the word fragmented. I use the word undifferentiated in the sense of freedom from multiplicity, all things seen as the same thing. Certain main distinctions will still be found to exist, but the emphasis is not on differentiation. Emphasis is not on differentiation. The will of the soul regarding that soul as having its place on one of the seven rays is superseded by the will of the whole. So we go from soulness into wholeness, if we can remember it that way, as we prepare for the fourth initiation. So from soulness into wholeness as we prepare for the fourth initiation. Well, this is important material. The undifferentiated energies of the universal mind. Freedom from multiplicity. Well, the analytical mind can be very multiple and very fragmented and very complex, and there is a type of, let's just say here, a type of simplicity takes over. Okay. Well, I've gone a little further in terms of time than I thought, but what I'm going to do is see 384, 381, That's basically where we are. And because of circumstances here, even though I'm not really at a half hour or 1 hour, I'm a little more than a half hour, I'm going to still break this. And if I can come back, I will. So this would be number 43, and it's number 27, and it's 381 to 384. It is still the 5th of September when we forget the 374, and we are going to go on to number 44, and it's going to be Rule 10, number 8, and it's going to be page 384 will be the beginning of this, and right. Okay, friends, so that's it for the moment, and we'll be beginning with DK saying these are words meaning but little, or having at best only a theoretical significance to students of this group, his outer group of which we can consider ourselves a part. Certainly we're not members in our present formation of the inner group. All right, thank you, and we'll go on as soon as we can. Wonderful book here, and as I look at it, I don't know, I'm just hoping that it's true what I see, that we've actually somehow done about 2/3 of the book, and only 1/3 remains. I certainly would like to get this to you in good order and shortly. So, study hard.